So I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes talking to you about the progress I'm making with my master's dissertation, which is about how doctors learn about diagnostic error. I wanted to explore the area of diagnostic error and how clinicians become aware of it and improve their work around it. I didn't want to focus on a small study. I wanted to broaden my knowledge to be useful at work, so I chose to do a literature review. I'm now going to talk about the literature base for diagnostic error, then about workplace learning, and then how they relate to each other. The literature on diagnostic error is still largely theoretical. There are 3 major papers that address the incidence of diagnostic error, and then there are a lot of theory-based papers and opinion-based ones on the cause, which all identify the cognitive system, so i.e. organisation spectrum, and posit a lot of different solutions. A lot of the empirical papers about solutions are post hoc. People have tried something and then written an analysis afterwards. So the issues identified include the definition of diagnostic error, which is debated amongst the experts on diagnostic error, and by experts I mean the people who write the most theoretically based pieces and the people who've published evidence-driven, more quantitative research. There's really quite a limited authorship on broad diagnostic error themes, and there is a lack of use of external things. So there's not a lot of reference to human error models or how patient safety literature can be used to complement ideas in research on diagnostic error, whereas as an outside reader of both, they clearly have strong links. So the diagnostic error literature defines broadly diagnostic error as a failure in the process leading to a delayed, missed or wrong diagnosis. There is agreement that it's multifactorial and that there's a spectrum from individual cognition through to government level organisational issues. The solutions aren't clear. That's partly because it's so multifactorial, it's difficult to tease out individual solutions. There is a general agreement that more empirical research is needed, not so much on the incidence, which is recognised as significant, but on the causes and the mitigants and how we can use those. Diagnostic error lacks an overarching conceptual framework. It's still under discussion because it's still an evolving topic. And it certainly lacks a strategy for the future, although there's a large American strategy paper coming out at the end of this year. I'm now going to talk about workplace learning. Workplace learning addresses how the workforce learn at work and learn at and for work. It swiftly divides how we learn into implicit and explicit learning. And implicit learning is that learning on the job about how to do the job through the experiences at work that you have, although it does also include thinking about work on your way home or when it bothers you. Workplace learning addresses learning as a way of acquiring knowledge for work rather than how we learn, and that's quite different from the constructs that perhaps academics about more generalist learning use, and the behavioural, cognitive, constructivist, social framework is used but is not the dominant framework for how we look at workplace learning. The issues within the workplace learning literature include that the empirical studies are based on physical skills rather than mental skills, so they're not directly transferable to diagnostic error. The literature is often binary, so it looks as this or that, and that's recognised as a problem, but it denies the complexity that is diagnosis. The literature on expertise is very cognitive and doesn't address expertise in the workplace as much as I would like. It's very theoretical and doesn't look at step change. So it doesn't look at how you become an expert when there's a revolution in what you need to know, rather than an evolutionary process. So in summary about workplace learning says that implicit learning is the primary source of learning for work, and that it occurs during everyday work, normal events and interactions. This reflects a social construct of learning, but there are cognitive components, particularly reflection, which are acknowledged. The discussion part of my dissertation is about how workplace learning can contribute to diagnostic error. I use the word contribute on purpose, contribute whether it be research, reduction, or ideas about how to improve diagnostic error. The assumption behind this is that all learning about healthcare should be about improving healthcare. So if we accept that the literature says that we learn predominantly through an implicit mechanism at and for work, then we need to think about how that works for diagnostic error. There's low awareness and low engagement in diagnostic error. We all underestimate our own diagnostic error rates. So we need a step change about how diagnostic error is looked at and thought about, or at least accelerated evolution. And this suggests that we need to engineer implicit learning, manipulate the workplace learning experience. The literature doesn't address this other than at an individual level, and even then it's not hugely addressed. It describes how it happens rather than how to make it happen. Obviously the ideas that you can use are, if you go back to learning theory and if you say have a community of practice, which fits very well with the implicit learning model, you can engage the community of practice in workplace learning, particularly the expert at the centre of it, so you can train up your experts, and there can be an organisational focus around it. The other thing that you can obviously do is use explicit learning, although not the dominant way of learning about the workplace. It is useful and may particularly be useful, I think, for where you need to make a step change, where you need to introduce a new idea and change the dynamic of the workplace. The issues with using workplace learning for diagnostic error are there's an issue of ownership. It's not a speciality-based skill, it's a generic skill, and therefore it's everybody's problem but nobody's problem. And I suspect this is the same for other areas, but I haven't explored that, like communication or ethics, because that would make the work too big. And then there's the issues about how to engage and own the issue, from individual through to organisation through to government levels. So in conclusion, diagnostic error is quite a hard thing to write and think about because it's such a new and evolving theme. There's not a lot of empirical data and it's largely theoretical at present, but it is a growing issue as evidenced by conferences, literature and investment in research in the area. So it's worth thinking about. Workplace learning suggests that implicit knowledge is the key to learning in the workplace, but how to manipulate and engineer workplace learning is not well addressed. My reading of the literature is that you can manipulate at an individual level, but it would probably be more useful if you manipulate at a broader organisational level, particularly when you need to address individual cognitive factors and system-based factors.